Guest today is a visionary entrepreneur who turned a deeply personal journey into a powerful movement. Nearly 4 years ago, Michelle Pualani Houston decided to take a break from alcohol. Not forever, just as a way to manage her mental health, anxiety, and energy. But that small decision led to a profound transformation. As the weeks turned into months, she discovered that life without alcohol meant more clarity, more motivation, and a deeper sense of purpose. What started as a personal experiment soon evolved into a mission. Alongside her husband, Michelle founded To Be Honest Beverage Co., a brand that's redefining drinking culture with sophisticated, functional, non-alcoholic spirits. It's about more than what's in the glass. It's about intention, empowerment, and making every person the main character of their own story. Today, Michelle is here to discuss the Sober Curious movement, how mindful choices can transform your life, and what it truly takes to build a purpose-driven brand that challenges the status quo. Please welcome Michelle Pualani Houston.
How's it going, Miss Michelle? How you doing?
I'm doing fabulous today, Donald. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm a little speechless from that amazing introduction.
I appreciate it. Yeah, when I came across your bio, I just, I had to learn more. Being military, I drank at one point way too much and not responsibly. And as I got older, I got wiser, and now I hardly drink at all. If I do, it's just a few here and there. And so when I came across your story, I thought, what a really cool idea. So I wanted to have you on and discuss your company and just see how things come about to start this whole thing.
Absolutely. Well, I think just like anyone, being based here in the US, drinking is just introduced into our culture, into our everyday, at least for me, such a young age. Technically we're not legally allowed to drink until 21, but I started drinking at about 14. I grew up in a small town and there wasn't a ton to do. And when you're spending time with friends, you're going to bonfires, you're going to house parties, it kind of has just a way of making its way in. And it was integrated into my family. It wasn't like an off limits thing. I know everyone has a slightly different story, but for us, my family drank. It was common at dinners, at holidays. And for the most part, it was generally like a fun, boisterous time. Like we didn't have any like what I would call like, bad drunks in my family and in my experience, but it was still so integrated. And, it's now at 35, it's been a long time. That's 20 years of drinking, not drinking, going out, traveling around the world, having different careers and making different life choices and relationships. And, my family's evolved and things have shifted and changed as my sisters have had kids. But my relationship with alcohol has always just kind of been a little touch and go. And I wouldn't say that I was in the place of having an alcohol addiction or feeling like I was struggling in that front. But like your introduction mentioned, I really kind of felt like I was experiencing mental health impacts. And at the time, I was actually having anxiety attacks. So different than your panic attack, but a sense of kind of like hopelessness, like crying fits, just kind of a little bit of hyperventilation, like not being able to like handle things. Mm-hmm. And along with the drinking came lethargy, lack of motivation, just kind of feelings of dis-ease in the days to follow, even if I wasn't drinking that much, it just was impacting me. And I love alcohol and the drinking culture and everything surrounding it, right? Like the social aspect, the connection, the flavor, having it paired with food. There's such a beauty to that experience. And my husband and partner, Jeremy, having been in alcohol production for so long, we were just integrated into that world. It permeated so much of our lives that it was challenging for me to think about what a life without alcohol would even look like, Yeah. And would it be something that I wanted? And at the time, everyone asks like, well, how did you do? I get a lot of questions now. How did you do it? And do you have any tips? And I never thought about it at the time as being a big choice, because for me, it was just like, oh, I'm just going to stop drinking for a while. I didn't set a time frame on it. I didn't have any real parameters. It wasn't like, I'm going to make this my life mission and I'm going to buckle down and like not drink. It was really just, it's not suiting me right now. I'm going to make a choice. And that time just expanded and grew, and I became, more happy, more confident, more satisfied with the choice, and just haven't felt the need to drink. I'll rephrase that. There have been times in which I felt like I've wanted to drink, but it hasn't been so strong, and it hasn't been enough of a good motivation outside of how I feel without it. So that's kind of just like more of the personal side of really what was kind of going on with me, how I experienced alcohol, and how it led me to this place. And like your introduction also mentioned, it wasn't with the intention, like I'm not saying alcohol is completely off the table for the rest of my life, but just actively on a day-to-day basis, really choosing to not drink. And then everything that I feel like a cascade effect has happened because of it, has really transformed my life. And of course, introduced, business and almost like a mission driven, thing that I feel like I kind of stumbled into, but it was, part of my story, part of my life.
Yeah. I think a lot of people assume, right? It is kind of funny because a lot of people assume when you stop drinking, you decide I'm not going to drink no more. That there's a problem, that you had an addiction or something happened, right? Because nobody just decides I'm not going to drink anymore because they're making a choice. That just doesn't happen. But yet when somebody stops smoking, nobody thinks twice about it. Oh, he just made a choice to stop smoking. And alcohol does not have that same impression on people. It is kind of odd when you think of it that way. But yeah, it sounds like you made a life choice. And it wasn't an addiction. It was just something that wasn't working out in your life at that moment. And I think that's awesome that you're able to do that, and that it's led to what we're going to start talking about here shortly, because you are right. Alcohol does have side effects. Heavy drinking results to older age looking than what you are. It results to a lot of health issues, especially beer and stuff that's got a lot of yeast and that type of stuff in it. So yeah, it's no different than smoking or anything else. It's not necessarily great for you, but it is part of our culture. My choice was bourbon. I love the history of bourbon. I love collecting the bottles and just doing those types of things, whether I drink it or not. I've even made my own bourbon, and it's just fun. It's not something that I have to do or I have to go drink at this moment, or, I can't go to a party and have a soda. None of those choices. It's just part of heritage and culture. And it brings a sense of normality because my family drank as well. So yeah, absolutely. So when you decided, right, and you said you guys were already in the alcohol business before this, is that what you said?
Yeah. So my husband has been, for the past decade, he co-founded a brewery in our area and then transitioned, and he's now still partner and head of manufacturing for a hard cider company. So he's produced and he's dabbled in spirits, and he's made wine and mead and lots of different products. And so the thing is like, again, with our intention, our goal as a business and brand, and especially as an individual, I never want there to be any like shame, guilt, or judgment surrounding alcohol. I just want there to be more of a general conversation around it being a choice. Like you mentioned, there are negative side effects just like that. Just like there's to caffeine and sugar and other intoxicants, it's like we all kind of get to choose from a consumption perspective what we want to engage in. And there's no shame or guilt in that experience. Same thing. Like I drank for years and years and years, and it is such a part of culture and history and connection and relationship building and industry. And we don't want to negate those things. It's just kind of opening up the conversation to what can we add in that maybe is alongside alcohol. And I think that's really where the industry is going. We kind of have these siloed experiences right now of non-alcoholic and alcohol, and they're separate. We're seeing the non-alcoholic bars come out, and certain alcohol locations are integrating non-alcoholic more consistently, but they've also kind of been like anti for a while. So you almost have these like they're almost fighting or at odds. But I see a future in which there's going to be a lot more integration. And so you can have alcohol and you can have non-alcoholic just as much. Like one's not better than the other, right? It's just a choice.
Well, I think you brought up a really good point. When I was deployed, sounds funny, right? But the military provided non-alcohol beer, right? And people could go have a beer. It tastes like beerish. It wasn't
beerish. I like that.
It was beerish, but it kind of brought a sense of home back to a place where you couldn't have it. And so I could see somebody having more fun at a non-alcohol bar than at a regular bar, because when people get intoxicated, the only ones having fun are the ones that are intoxicated. The ones that just have a small buzz going or have been, drinking in moderations realizes they've now been put on babysitter control, and it becomes not as fun anymore. Right. Yeah. But, it also seems to me a very good advertising market for a alcohol serving bar. Something like, if you are the designated driver and you show that you're a designated driver, you get half off non-alcohol beverages, and they can make the same things like what we're going to talk about. And you're still part of the party, from an outsider's looking in. There's nothing different other than you're not putting alcohol in the drinks. So I think it's got a lot of purposes in both ways to help out. How did this conversation go when you brought it up to your husband and say, "Hey, I want to get in the alcohol business minus the alcohol"?
So my husband has always been incredibly supportive of almost everything that we've done. We've been married for almost 5 years now, but together for going on 14. So we've, spent a lot of time together. We've been through businesses closing. We've been through, family stuff. We've been through a lot together. And I think in any relationship, at least hopefully healthy relationship, you can support the other in their choice. This is actually a conversation that does come up with our clients and customers consistently, is perhaps one party in the partnership wants to reduce their alcohol intake or change things up a bit. And unfortunately, I've seen it go both ways, where one partner starts to make those choices and starts maybe eating healthier and doing different things, and the other partner doesn't want to come along with that. I think there's a challenge here, right? Because alcohol can be such a positive thing for certain people in an industry because of the culture, because of, celebratory things and rituals. There's a lot engaged in alcohol that can be very positive and, somewhat limited, right? People are having like smaller amounts in those situations. But alcohol can also be used as a tool for coping, numbing, avoiding, getting to the point of intoxication where you are not making great choices. You've essentially poisoned your body. You're having the physical, the mental, the emotional repercussions of that experience. And it can be really challenging to talk someone through that. So I'm really grateful because my partner, it wasn't a situation in which he felt like he needed to hold on to all those things. And things started to transition over time. So the best thing that I can say when it comes to like human behavior and relationships and partnerships is you're not going to change anyone. You're not going to be able to influence someone to the point of, I want you to do this. I need you to do this. That doesn't work in a healthy partnership and relationship. And the thing that I found to be the most successful is modeling behavior. And so if I can make certain choices and model certain choices and model the lifestyle and behavior that I want to lead, then that can trickle to the people in my life. And if they choose to adopt those things and kind of match my energy and come alongside me, then that makes sense for moving forward in a relationship. If they want to either do the opposite or move away from or continue to drink or even shame or judge me for my choices, then it's likely that that friendship, that partnership, that relationship isn't going to sustain in the long term because they're not supporting what it is that I want to do. And our interests and our lifestyle changes. And if you're going to be in partnership, in a relationship, in a spousal situation, you have to align in terms of values and lifestyle choices and, what it is you want your future to be.
Yeah.
And at this time, now it's been about 3.5 years since I stopped drinking. When I stopped drinking, it wasn't like there were no ultimatums. There were no, you can't drink around me. There was nothing that I told my husband that I would say needed to change in any way, shape, or form. If anything, it was beneficial because now I was always the designated driver and there was no oh, you tonight, oh, me tonight, or how are we doing this?
Yeah.
So, it became really easy if we were going to an event, if we were going to an activity, he was drinking and I wasn't. And I was okay with that. One of the, as a side tangent to note, is one of the interesting benefits of not drinking is how confident you feel to take care of other people, and you feel safe driving them, you feel safe coordinating, you feel like the one. And for some reason, for me, that's really deeply satisfying to always know that I am coherent enough to be able to take care of the people that I love and care about in my life. So it's kind of like a weird little side thing that I found that's been really beneficial for me along this experience. But I didn't give him any ultimatums when I first got started or any needs that he had to do anything. But over the course of time, he started adopting my habits. If I'm not drinking, it's not like we're sitting down and opening a bottle of wine together and sharing that. It's not like we're going out to a bar and having 3 or 4 cocktails. Now we're still going out, we're still enjoying our dinners together, but because I'm drinking less, it just kind of affects his drinking less. And so now at home, he pretty much only drinks 0 proof beers. And he's talked a lot about it recently, and we've talked a lot about it recently, is that he doesn't really even crave the alcohol anymore when we're in a bar setting or at home. And he's had a couple beers or gotten a couple drinks out, and the flavor has changed for him because your palate will change when you stop drinking alcohol. It just shifts and it adjusts. And so he's slowly transitioned to maybe he'll drink once, twice a week now. And the same thing, he doesn't limit himself. He said he definitely isn't like, I don't drink or anything like that. But along the way, he's also found more kind of healthy habits. He's lost a lot of weight. He's trimmed up. He's focused on working out. He walks a lot. He also paddles with an outrigger canoe club group. And so just like anything in our lives, things can be dominoes. And alcohol for me was one of those dominoes that became, better choices in other places, eating differently, moving differently, sleeping differently. And it just kind of shifting things for my overall health and well-being that he has seen and then wanted to support and come alongside me.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a healthy, situation prior. Wasn't any of that type of stuff, and it makes perfect sense that his drinking would slow down when yours stopped, just because of the fact that most people don't enjoy drinking by themselves. Maybe having a beer, watching TV or something like that, but for the most part, at least the people I've associated with, that's kind of the way it was if they'd grab a beer, they'd always grab 2 and grab 1 for you just because they wanted somebody to drink with. And I think bourbon, that's part of the heritage, have a sip and a conversation and put it up and have a good day and save some for tomorrow. And I think that's really cool. So when you guys decided to move into this business and make these kind of drinks, how did the menu get decided? How did you guys say, what products are we going to make first and how are we going to bring this to market?
So I'll preface with, the products can be across the board, just like for me and for Jeremy with his design and his abilities from a production perspective, because we manufacture everything in-house. So a lot of products when they come to market are what you would call co-packed. And so there's a facility in which you're either working with them or you're just giving them the recipe. however that relationship looks like, but someone else is manufacturing and packaging your product. Super common in the CPG and non-alc space. We manufacture from start to finish because we're very small batch. I would consider us like a mom and pop brand because we're just still very, very small.
Right.
We want to be able to grow, but we don't have any funding. We're still bootstrapped. Like it's just, it really was a test idea in the first place. You know, we wanted to get something onto the market to see if it was going to traction at all. And now that we've had that demonstrated success, now we want to focus on growing and figuring out what that looks like. But from a production perspective, Jeremy is kind of the type of guy who can create anything, do anything. You know, his cider company, hard cider, is not like, okay, you have like a sweet, a not so sweet, like a heritage and things like that. No, he has like over 25 different flavor profiles. He, you know, sources the ingredients. Sometimes he's hand juiced those ingredients, everything from pomegranates to pineapple to everything else. And so this is just me being very proud of my partner and husband. But he has an incredible ability to develop flavor profiles and different concepts. And he understands manufacturing and packaging to the point where we could have come to market with what we would call an RTD, ready to drink, which is any canned or bottle option that you can just pour out or consume as is. We could do any type of spirit option. And so the options and the opportunities were sort of limitless in that front. But we started to do a little bit of research. And when it came to the RTD or canned space, there's a ton of competition. It is very high volume and high cost and low profit margin in order to get into that space. And so we had some conversations with people who are already in that world in non-alc and just didn't think it would be the best go-to-market option for us. So we came back and then thinking about what it is that I wanted and what I felt like was missing in the market. And with non-alcoholic spirits, there's some really great brands out there who have done a phenomenal job just kind of paving the path of what it means to have high quality non-alc in bars and restaurants or in your home bar environment to be able to make cocktails. But I was a big cocktail drinker, you know, wine. I had stopped drinking beer years ago, actually, just because it didn't sit well with me. But when it came to wine or other options, I really preferred cocktails. And I loved going to a bar and I loved having like handmade cocktails at home. And so we thought, okay, let's go with the spirit alternative route. And then my favorite spirit is gin. So that's the direction we went first. It's also kind of, I think, one of the most versatile and one of the more easy to replicate, because if you think of like vodka, for example, that's just like ethanol. There's not a ton of like flavor profile to it. Bourbon and whiskey is a bit more challenging, not doable, but definitely a bit more challenging when it comes to building the flavor profile outside of alcohol. And then tequila, of course, is a potential, but gin was just kind of like, okay, this makes sense. And then as far as the functionality goes, because I was managing and dealing with anxiety and because I wanted something that gave me an experience. So you have a lot of non-alc spirits that are just that. They mimic traditional spirits, but they're essentially distilled essences, which is kind of like fancy water in a bottle. It might have like a little bit of flavor. It might have a little bit of texture, but ultimately you're not really getting anything out of it. And then when you build that into a cocktail, it typically creates either a bland, overly sugared, or just kind of like funky tasting experience.
Yeah.
And so I wanted flavor and function combined. And so that function is really anything that offers you either an experience or a benefit. So you'll hear like functional drink options on the market. And that's anything in your like adaptogenic, nootropic, mushroom-based, kind of when you think of like supplementation, quote unquote, that's what you're thinking when you think function. And so for us, we went with a hemp-infused CBD option or a hemp-derived CBD option. Okay. So we use an industrial hemp. We source from a great manufacturer who does all of the processing. It's a nano-emulsified technology. So it's essentially taking an oil and chemical compound and putting that into solution so that it stays in solution. And that CBD is a really benign option. It's actually what you would consider a non-intoxicant. So anything in the intoxicant category is going to affect the brain in a way that makes you somewhat, quote unquote, impaired or just gives you some sort of altered state. So for example, sugar is an intoxicant, caffeine is an intoxicant, THC or marijuana is an intoxicant, alcohol is an intoxicant. So it gives you some sort of altered mental state. So our product doesn't do that. There's no buzz, there's no high. But some of the science-backed research with CBD shows anti-inflammatory, helps manage anxiety, aids in sleep quality, and there are kind of low cons and low contraindications as far as the use goes. And that was sort of the directive that I wanted to go when it came to the functional experience of the product. So those were kind of the thought processes and the steps that we took in order to discover what's the products that we want to introduce, how do we want to engage with it, and what is the benefit that our customers are going to experience by having something like this.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with you on the CBD. I use CBD as well. And since I've done that, I've had less knee pain and less joint pain and stuff like that. And I like the fact that it doesn't provide a high. I could take, one of those gummies that's CBD and drive because it's just nothing there, It's no different than taking an ibuprofen, but except it actually works longer and
yeah. And there's not so many contraindications. Have you ever seen like any pain medication and like the potential side effects? You're like, wait a second, I'm trying to manage a headache, but I might have liver damage and like all of these other issues. Wait a second. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, the VA is, I get 6 bottles a year of 500 count, 800 milligram ibuprofen. That's what the VA gives me.
Wow.
Yeah. And whenever you go in, and I've complained about knee problems and shoulder problems and everything else. I'm 100% disabled. And to this day, that's my pain meds for those aches and pains is ibuprofen, And so I found CBD from asking other people and doing my own research to find something that worked, because I didn't like the stomach problems and everything that came from ibuprofen. So yeah, that is a genius idea of adding that stuff to drinks, because there is health benefits from it, and they're not going to hurt themselves by having 4 or 5 that day or something like that, So yeah, that's awesome. Especially mushrooms. I think mushrooms are the superfood, They really do a lot of good stuff, and there's a lot of good research behind psychedelics and stuff like that as well. But I don't think I can imagine a psychedelic in an alcohol drink. That would be kind of crazy.
We'll see. I mean, there's some definite things that we're kind of watching psilocybin come out into the market in low doses, although we're also seeing the regulation around this is really challenging. So I always love to advise consumers is like, do your due diligence. And any THC or CBD product on the market, and when I say THC from a general consumption perspective, federally, you can have a hemp-derived CBD or THC product as long as it doesn't go above about 0.3% THC within the product. Now, we're based out of California and we have slightly different regulations. So we have to be 0 THC across the board. But that was always our intent from the beginning, because we didn't want any psychoactive. THC can actually build up in the system too and can cause, issues perhaps over time if someone's sensitive to it. So our goal was completely to be a 0% product. And then, we're third-party lab tested. Everyone is legally required to be third-party lab tested. We use an exceptional lab. And there's a lot of products on the market who, like, for example, with the psilocybin discussion, I was just reading or hearing about this, is there are some products who are supposed to be low dose, but they actually didn't have any psychedelic impact to them. And there's one thing to be said, there's a placebo effect out there that is real, that, okay, it's like if you're having an effect, then it doesn't really matter whether it's in there or not. But we're talking about like consumer trust and ensuring that consumers have the right information. And that's one of our goals, is to be a transparent company in that regard, and also ensure ideally that our consumers are getting what they are they think they're getting, from a milligram and dosage perspective, which can be challenging from a labeling standpoint. We try to do our best to stay within, a few milligrams. We have a slightly higher concentrated product. So we have about 25 milligrams of CBD per fluid ounce, which a lot of products are usually about 20-ish milligrams per 2 fluid ounces. So we have, maybe about 2x or more milligrams per our bottle than most comparative products on the market. But it is interesting, and I do always advise consumers, do your research, do your due diligence, look at some white papers and check out the research and data behind the products that are going onto the market, because it's a highly unregulated industry right now. And even things like kava or certain nootropics and adaptogens, like there are things that can produce like a come down effect and have different impacts on your hormones. And so just because it is quote unquote functional doesn't necessarily mean it's guaranteed healthy for you. And there are contraindications to consumption. So for us, our product is similar to grapefruit in that it'll impede certain medications. So you do have to be thoughtful and check with your doctor and consult with your doctor that it won't impact your medications. But otherwise, again, I just advise people to take that time and consider what they're consuming and not just take it for face value or marketing value that it's going to be positive for you.
Yeah. So, people listening to this, that means actually spending more than 3 seconds on a reel to make your life choice decisions. There is another page after the first page on Google to continue the research. But absolutely. I think it's really cool how you've taken this even another step forward. It's not about the healthy decision from having non-alcohol versus alcohol, but now we're adding ingredients that somebody may or may not take individually, but when they can take that at a non-alcohol bar or something like that, where they're just drinking, now they're getting supplements as well as a healthy drink alternative choice, and they're going to make it home safely. They're all huge benefits. What has the challenges been? What have you found to be extremely difficult in this startup process?
Well, across the board, there are regulatory aspects of our product that have made it just more interesting than if we were just like a straight non-alcoholic option that didn't have any additional things to it. Mm-hmm. That being said, I do think that functional drinks are still the way of the future. And so even though we have a hemp-derived CBD in our first product, we'll continue to explore other functional options, but it's still always still always challenging in the sense that there are going to be regulatory aspects involved, and we have to be conscious of maintaining, our standing from a production, manufacturing, distribution company, and ensuring that, again, our consumers are safe and that they're well protected through the process. That is kind of like the number one thing, only because it's kind of a little bit of like a mental challenge, right? Because if you know that your product won't be able to be distributed in an area or the way that you intend for it to be, you don't have the same channels, then that's kind of always on your mind in the sense of like, okay, well, if we can't be distributed by a traditional distributor, if this, like, for example, if an alcohol distributor can't carry our type of product, just, hypothetically in a type of situation, okay, then how are we going to go about the distribution channels and approach that process?
Right.
But more so than anything, it's kind of just like getting the word out. There are so many channels for marketing and, with the digital platforms these days and social media, there's so much opportunity, but there's also so much noise and there's so much happening and things happen so swiftly as well, right? We have such a trendy amount of consumption that people are seeing things and then they're moving on to the next. And so being able to capture and hold that attention is definitely a challenge for us.
Yeah.
From a production perspective, we haven't encountered too many issues because we hold the power. We're not dealing with sourcing issues or co-packing issues because we're not really at the whim or control of other people, so to speak. We had some issues, in terms of sourcing more around the holiday time. Things can kind of get pushed back, and that can be challenging because as a physical product business, we have to have ingredients, we have to have bottles, we have to have labels, we got to have caps, we got to have the boxes that we send things to people. Like there are all these pieces involved to a physical product business that I know, being in the service industry for so long, I, did health coaching and fitness coaching. And so I didn't have to deal with shipping across the country to New York. And we run into those types of, small hiccups and issues. But I always tell people that, I'm in the business of solving problems every single day. I learn how to do things that I've never done before. And that's literally my job, is just figuring things out. And so I see it as opportunities, and I see it as a chance to learn and to grow, and that it's my responsibility as the business owner, as the founder, to figure those things out. So we're in the stage of really developing, paid and organic strategy to be able to reach more people. The public relations side of showing up, front facing, having these conversations, I think are incredibly powerful for us. And the education side, I think that from a challenge perspective is there's a lot of people who conflate CBD and THC, and there's not a lot of understanding around it. And so they think, oh, I'm going to get high, or, oh, that's not a good product, because the marketing in the past has made marijuana, made cannabis, made hemp all look very negative in the public eye.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of facing a little bit of an educational battle when it comes to changing people's belief systems, changing people's perspectives, and being able to communicate that. If you look at, again, the no judgment, no shame or anything else, but if you look at alcohol on paper and what it does to people's lives, what it does to people's bodies, how much it contributes to car crashes, violence, like all of the things related to alcohol consumption, if you were like let's just say like you're an alien and you're looking at this, you'd question, like, why would someone do this to themselves? Why would someone do this to their body? Why would they do it to their relationships? Why would they do it to their culture and their society when it has such a negative impact that's like very, very clear on paper? Alcohol fetal syndrome, like everything related to it.
Yeah.
And then you look at something like our product, and, CBD from when it was really starting to be introduced was really, even for young kids, was like treating epilepsy and managing those symptoms. And then everything that it's been studied from a medical perspective and from an experience perspective is it pales in comparison, right? It pales in comparison to the impact of alcohol and how the two products can be placed side to side in terms of, again, the mental, physical, emotional, like ripple effect on the rest of your life impact. But people still see hemp marijuana as this like negative thing to some degree because of what they've been taught, because of what's been marketed in the past. Mm-hmm. And so it's just been an interesting conversation. A lot of people are very open to it, just like you. Like I have a lot of conversation with people who are like, oh my gosh, yes, I use it all the time. I absolutely love it. But then some people just like, oh wait, like I've never had that before. Or I don't really understand it. And so that's kind of a continuous conversation that I feel like we're still having.
Yeah. I owned a trucking company after I got out of the military. And when, I drove all through the United States as that process of marijuana being, legal here and there and so forth. And, I'll be honest, the only negative thing that I have found about it is the way that we legalized it. We created a lot of additional problems of homelessness and stuff like that because people flocked to the states that they could legally smoke. And I think it'd be the same thing if we did that with alcohol. People are going to literally uproot because they want to drink and so forth. But then that you create the housing shortages and everything else. On top of that, I don't think the average American understands how much money persuades what you see, right? And this is something that has happened way before technology. It's not an internet problem. It's a manufacturing tradition. If I'm selling oil and somebody's creating electricity, I'm going to publish in the papers and pay to have my article put on the front page showing how bad electricity is and how dangerous it is, because I don't want to lose that market share. And that's exactly what's happened with a lot of the stuff, especially pharmaceuticals. The number one amount of commercials that you're going to see, and this ain't conspiracy type stuff. This is just standard business. This is a company that's trying to make money and make sure they don't lose any part of their share. You already mentioned it. The industry that you're in is extremely challenging. Shelf placing and everything else becomes just brutal, on what these companies pay to have, the right shelf, right height, and right placing of their products. So that is going to be very challenging. And I think the education part of it, like you said, is going to be challenging as well, because one, you've got to get people to say, oh, you know what, I actually do want to learn. And then that means I got to spend more than 3 seconds in TikTok to get my information. And I hope AI brings that reality back to normal. I really do. Just because of the fact that I think it's unhealthy for people to make decisions based off of very short amounts of research. As a podcaster, I have that problem as well. You would not believe how many people drop off before the introduction's even over with. And it's, they make their decision based off of what they've seen in the last 4 or 5 seconds. And, that's unfortunate, because 28 minutes into the episode, they may have heard something that could have changed their life, and you just never know. Let me ask you this. When you started this procedure, right, and going into it, what was your hope from it? What was your 10,000 foot view of what you've seen coming?
So I feel like I've always been, more of the visionary side of entrepreneurship. I tend to look sometimes too far forward and focus too much on the future. So I'm trying to manage, okay, day to day, what can I do now? Staying focused, like actual implementation, in addition to what I see for us as we move forward. My goal as a business and brand is to be an internationally distributed product and hopefully at least get partially or fully acquired at some point. Now, personally, my goal and mission is to have non-alcoholic option be that inclusive conversation. And that's kind of what I was talking about in the beginning, in how I see the future of our social, cultural, experiential, relationship building, connection points. I envision that to look very different than just meeting someone at the bar for beers, or, just having alcohol like permeate everything that we do. Because, you mentioned this concept of people who are not drinking in the bar having either just as much fun or more fun in that non-alcoholic choice. And a lot of people have that sense of, well, FOMO, right? Like, what if I miss out? What if I don't have as much fun? Oh, not drinking means I'm not going to have a good time. And it's still kind of surprising, if we set up at markets or pop-ups or serving our product somewhere, we still get people ask like, well, what's the point? What's the point of not drinking something? And of course, the further I get away from alcohol, I'm like, well, if you think about everything that you're doing to your mind, to your body, and the experience, like, what is the point of alcohol? That's just my perspective sometimes these days. But ultimately, it's presence, it's intention, it's mindfulness, it's choice, choosing not the route of distraction, coping, numbing, intoxication, and choosing the route of how can I actually be myself, embody who I am, show up with that confidence, and truly make connections, share in experiences without needing the tools to like get myself out of this experience. It's kind of that idea of people like live for the weekend. They work during the week, they just put their heads down, and then they go into the weekend and they drink and they party, and then they go back to their week and they just try to make it through to the weekends. It's like, how can I pause, step back, and actually put myself into the moment of living my life as it is, as it comes to me, as I experience it? And so my mission is along those lines. And so that's like the 10,000 foot view, is how can we shift this mentality? How can we shift this perspective? How can we shift our lifestyle and our culture so that you're not 14 getting drunk at a bonfire, puking your guts out, because that was my story. And I've been doing so much of this recently. I turned 35 this year, and it really has made me reflect on and think about like what I did as a young person and how much time I gave away and how much I sacrificed instead of doing and choosing, healthy activities or ways in which I was exploring or traveling or interning or working or creating or you name it, like anything outside of just showing up, getting drunk and basically again poisoning your body, right?
Yeah.
Like and when you're especially young and how that impacts your brain and your development and everything else. And so 10,000 foot view from a business and brand perspective, we want to be internationally distributed, partially acquired or majority acquired, and be at the place where our brand and product is changing people's lives. And I see that on a very small scale now, people telling me like, thank goodness I can get this at a local bar and restaurant, because when I go out with my friends, I don't want to drink. And this makes me feel included. It makes me feel like I'm enjoying something. It feels sophisticated. It feels elevated. I get to have the exact same experience without worrying about intoxication, without worrying about the next day hangover.
Yeah.
And then in the home environment, we have across the nation, we have customers who get our product and share stories with me and feedback about how it's changed their relationships at home, how it's changed their relationships with their kids, how it's enabled them to be more present, to be more mindful, to, sometimes even with drinking, I've had moms share with me that if they drank the night before, then they're cranky with their kids the next day and snapping at them. And they don't want that from motherhood. They don't want that for their relationships. They don't want their kids to experience that. So it's this funny thing that we think about drinking as just alcohol, but it moves out and impacts our careers, our professional lives. It impacts our personal relationships, spouses, intimate partners. It impacts our kids. It impacts our families, our moms, our dads, our siblings. Like it really does permeate into these other aspects of our lives. And so my hope and goal is that we can move more toward a future of just intention and choice. And whether that does include alcohol or not, it doesn't matter either way. It's not good or bad, but that someone can be super intentional and make those choices without feeling like they're subject to peer pressure, without feeling like they're subject to, oh, this is just what we do. Like we just go to happy hour, or I always drink at networking events, or, okay, we're going to a party. And so I am just going to consume. And so that's what I want to be, hopefully, a more prominent part of our culture and conversation and narrative as a society.
Yeah, I think you're right on there. Listening to what you were saying, talking about the hangovers, it made me think of a funny story that happened in my younger days. And you're absolutely right. The hangovers are brutal, and the older you get, it's even harder. And the next morning's even worse. I was on my way to Afghanistan, and we broke down in England, and so the plane was going to be there overnight. So we decided to go out and just have a couple drinks and a meal. And we found this bar/restaurant that was more bar than restaurant. And we started drinking. And next thing I know, somebody asked the ladies what time they closed. And they said, well, when you stop drinking. And, that almost sounded like a challenge. And so, yeah. But yeah, I was pretty intoxicated, and I guess from the way things went, we were walking the streets asking people if they've seen Bin Laden, that we were looking for him.
Oh my goodness.
We were pretty intoxicated, and that flight from there to Afghanistan was just horrible. I mean, I've never been so sick in my life. I can't think of anything else that does that to you, that you would go back and do it again. I don't know how many times I said, I'm never doing this again. And that night I'm doing it again. And
yeah,
it just becomes brutal. It really does. And
yeah,
I'm glad now, I wasn't one of those guys that don't get hangovers, because, maybe I'd still be drinking as much as I used to, I just not a fan of pain.
Well, I mean, your story, I mean, like, we all have those stories, and I can't lie. Like, and I'm not even trying to say like those are memorable times and experiences. Like there are times you're drinking, your inhibitions are lowered. You're probably doing things that you might have not done otherwise. But I will say, like, a lot of times, sometimes you're like blacked out, or maybe you don't remember everything. And so then it's like, well, then wait, like, what was the point if like it just was a crazy wild night? So I can't deny that there have been times. I mean, even across the world, my husband and I took a really great trip to Germany and Pilsen, and it was just, being in the Czech Republic, being surrounded by that, again, culture and identity, drinking beer and going to the Pilsner brewery and having that experience. There's something so rich about doing things of that nature. And you can't deny that there are a lot of positive times and experiences that come out of that. But still, the impact of it, what you deal with later, is why do you do that? Why do you torture yourself like that? And can we have something that gives us a similar experience? Or can we have that same uninhibited experience with a CBD product, with an alternative functional product, that we then get to experience that amazing night? We stay up all night. We do the fun things. We do the silly things. We do the things that are once in a lifetime, but then we don't have to pay for it so much later. So how can we facilitate that? And that's something that I'd love to try to pursue and figure out.
Yeah. And that's what I like about what your product represents is it increases your options. It doesn't decrease them. If I wanted to, I could go to a bar, have a beer or a glass of whiskey or whatever my choice is, and then switch to non-alcohol drinks that taste similar to what I just had, look the same. Nobody really has to know the difference, and so forth. And I've still had that one or two little drinks that relaxed me. And then after that, I didn't drink alcohol anymore. And the night goes on. I can still safely get home, or at least be, able to tell a DD where I live, or a cab driver where I live, And I think all of those are just additional options that people don't think of. They think it seems like when they discuss this, it has to be either or, and it doesn't have to be. Nobody's saying you can't drink or you shouldn't drink. Everybody's saying here's an additional choice to allow you to enjoy the time you had drinking or in those scenes, versus ending up in some sort of porta john puking and regretting the next day's stories. So I think I really like what you guys have done. I mean, that is really cool. I love the function part of it as well, because there is so many health benefits to it as well. I hope, to see this in a lot of not just non-alcohol bars, but as options in alcohol related bars as well, because I do think our society would have a lot more fun and maybe even be a little bit more empathetic to each other and be able to do things without having to have some liquid courage to do those things. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Donald. Beautifully said. And I agree. Yeah. I think it's about what can you additionally bring into your life? And when you start introducing positive things, it's amazing. You don't feel like you're giving things up. I never feel like I'm sacrificing in a negative way. That's like, oh, I'm just missing out on alcohol all the time. It's like, well, if I have alternatives that I love, I'm still in those environments. And, again, kind of like an unexpected positive benefit that's come out of this is I feel more like myself now than I ever have before. When I'm in social settings, in a bar or over to a friend's house for a dinner party, I feel like I laugh more. I'm more present. I'm more confident. I'm more just like, I just feel like bigger, for some reason. When I was drinking, you have like it, I know that, people say like liquid courage, but it's almost this inhibiting thing. Once you get away from it, you realize how much it was actually holding you back, or how much you were judging yourself, or how much you were then worried, like, am I slurring my words, or what's happening to me? Or like, you have to consider all those things. And then Yeah, there's so much. I could talk all day, but there's so much to it. But I do think that we're heading into a beautiful time of, let me have a glass of wine with my steak, red wine with dinner, and then switch to a non-alcoholic cocktail. And so I think it's about integration. I think it's about addition and kind of choosing those things that you want to bring in positively to your life.
Yeah, I think, the biggest part of this is just, generational changes. It seems like as generations change, things in our society change, our customs change, and our acceptance changes. And so
Mhm.
I do think that we are headed in the right direction. I do believe someday that it will no longer be about the pharmaceutical abilities to impress versus doctors being able to make the choices of things that can do just as good of a job without the strong effects, or at least have that in their toolbox to be able to use. So
Yeah.
I think all that stuff is coming down the road, and I look forward. I hope to see it one day, or at least my kids see it, because I think it'll do wonders for our mental health in the aspects of the things that we create and do every day. I'm gonna bring you forward and give you the opportunity to tell everybody where they can get your products, where they can reach out to you guys and learn more, and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So we are To Be Honest Bev. It's TOBE Honest, HONEST, and Bev is in beverage. So you can find us on every platform at that handle, or on our website, To Be Honest Bev, TOBE Honest Beverage, BEV. And feel free to reach out with questions. Again, I always encourage consumers to make important decisions based on research, based on looking into the details. So if you do have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us via DM on any of those platforms, and connect with us via chat on our website, because I can understand and know that our clients, our customers, like, what your experience is our main goal. That's it. You're the main character of your story, your drinking experience. And so if you have further questions, I'm always happy to respond and answer them. We're ready to receive those. So feel free to reach out. You can buy online, but I highly encourage you to also check out your local non-alcoholic bars and bottle shops, depending on where you are. We're in a handful across the country, so you can always reach out and see if we're in your area. But you can also go into your non-alcoholic bar, bottle shop, and ask for To Be Honest, and see if they have it. We're continuing to expand in normal bars and restaurants. We find that that's a great success place for us, but we're currently really only distributed within our local area, and we're hoping to grow within California in the next year.
All right. And I hope everybody that's listened to this, has gotten the ability to open their minds a little bit and realize there is alternative choices out there that doesn't change right or wrong. They're just different, and different is what makes us all really cool to begin with. So don't be afraid to try something new. There's a lot of benefits to it. Michelle, thank you for coming on. I really had a good conversation, and I learned quite a bit, and I can't wait to try the drinks myself. So my hat's off to what you guys have done.
Thank you so much, Donald. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. This has been great.
No problem. For the rest of y'all, be safe. Don't forget, don't let the day kick your ass. Kick the day's ass.